Hey there, this is Philip from Beyond the Tabletop. In this series of videos I'm covering my converted Halfling Blood Bowl team, the Jammy Dodgers. Next up are the coaching staff. So what I have here is I've got the head coach, I've got the Halfling Master Chef, I've got an Apothecary, and then I've got three banner bearers. Now the banner bearers are actually going to be game tokens, so the two at the back are going to be my reroll and turn counters, and then the much larger banner is going to represent the score. I think it's only fair to start off with my coach, Filbert Five Pies. This guy is comprised of two models from the Lord of the Rings kit. It's the Hobbit townsfolk. This guy actually has some weird pointy hair, which I cut off. One of the other models was holding the top hat, so I just carefully cut away the hand from the hat and added it to this guy. So his arm on the left, I ended up reposing it. Originally I was just trying to bend it with a bit of heat, but ended up snapping it. So I had to sort of pin it in place and repose it. So it now looks like he's shouting at the team. So on the right hand arm, he's just got his strategy playbook that he's holding. I just made that out of some simple green stuff that I'd rolled out flat and just carefully placed it in his arm like so. So for the Halfling Master Chef, this was quite a simple conversion. The model comes from the old Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which I just had since a kid. I think the chef is firing a hot pot at the enemy like a catapult. He originally had a meat cleaver in his hand, which I thought was a little bit too violent for the chef. Instead, I wanted him holding around a lump of meat that he's going to be waving to encourage his teammates to play better. The piece of meat originally came from Grack and Crumbleberry. That's the Warhammer World exclusive model. Grack, being the ogre, has this lump of meat hanging from his side. Now I didn't want to use that original piece, so I created a little two-part mould just to replicate it. These little press moulds don't come out quite as detailed as the original, but I think for what it is and for what it needs to be, I think that's more than okay. This guy is the last model that I created. He's the Halfling Apothecary, although really he's the tree surgeon, because for most Halfling teams you want to save your Apothecary for your treemen rather than your Halflings. So here I've got him holding a tree saw, an idea that was given to me by someone on the Blood Bowl community group on Facebook, so thank you very much, I really appreciated that. So once the bow had been removed, it was a relatively simple process with this guy. I had to bend his arm around quite a bit with some pliers, just so the two hands would line up. The saw itself, that came from a Space Marine chainsaw. What I had to do was carefully cut out the top half of it, and then I actually cut it in half as well, along thin, just to make it a long and thin line. That was just required a sharp knife really, and was very careful to do that bit. And then I just sort of trimmed down the sides just to make it fit. I glued it in place. I cut away one of the fingers so it looks like he's less pulling on a bow and more holding something. And then these two bits are just spare bits of resin. I always have loads lying around from Forge World bits because it's super handy, like these small circular bits of resin. I drilled into this hand just so I could sort of countersink this one, whereas that one is just glued straight on. So really nice simple conversion. I think it looks quite good. He also looks a lot different from all the others, so I can paint him up slightly differently. This was a pretty quick conversion. It took me probably about an hour to do tops. It was sort of no time at all in comparison to some of the others. These are my standard bearers. These are my turn and reroll counters. I thought it'd be quite good that they're kind of carrying poles. These guys were originally from the fantasy range and they were archers. So as you can see, he was just holding his bow, whereas this guy was in a sort of shooting pose. So I had to sort of be a bit creative with how I came about this. For them holding the poles. Now the poles are just sort of some steel rod that I picked up from modelling supplies, and then I've used the top, which I think came from an Empire kit, which is for normally I think sort of joust end that I just kind of cut off. For the flag ends I just had to carefully drill that out to slot the pole into. As you can see I broke it off here, which is why I've had to sort of do a bit of green stuff reconstruction on that one. This one was pretty straightforward. All I had to do was drill out a hole for his hand and then thread the pole in and then just green stuff the gap just so it sort of fitted all the way around. This guy was a bit more tricky because he's posed as if he's shooting his arrow, so I just decided to green stuff what looks like a little sausage or a bit of food that he's going to have a nibble on, so it looks like he's eating rather than shooting anything. And again, I just had to drill out his arm and slot the pole through. On the back, he had some quivers coming out of this bag, which I had to carefully remove and file away. And I think I just accidentally clipped off that end of the mine mug. So I just had to green stuff that back into place. And actually the mine mug is one that I did a press mould for a few of the other halflings. So this guy is probably my favourite mini that I've had to convert up. So he's my score counter, so I wanted him to be a little bit more exciting. So he's got a much bigger banner from one of the Empire kits. Again, just using a bit of steel rod for the pole. So this guy is eating some chicken wings, and like all the other halfling bannermen, he was actually originally an archer from the old fantasy kit. So this hand here was originally rested on top of his bow. So I just had to twist it around so he could be holding the pole in the right way. And in doing so I ended up breaking it off, and then I just had to pin it in place. And again, drilling that out. So on the back, he originally had some quivers going along here, and it was such a sort of terrible job trying to remove it, I sort of decided to do a cover-up job. So I made a crusty baguette out of green stuff, just to kind of hide that detail there. And then just making some green stuff rope for the bag and for the baguette itself. And the baguette idea I liked so much, I ended up doing it for one of the halfling players, which you can see in the other video that I've done. So the best bit about this model is the rooster at the top. I was googling lots of different ideas for sort of halfling banners and for the icons at the top, and roosters seem to be sort of the go-to result of most halflings from Warhammer Fantasy, so I decided to do something similar. Now the team itself is the Jammy Dodgers, which is a bit more bakery based. So the story behind this is that the team is sponsored by Biffo's Golden Wings, hence the rooster on the top. It sort of fits in almost coincidentally that the model is eating some chicken as well, which I didn't really think about at the time, but the two ideas just came together. So here is the rooster up close. Now this was my first attempt at green stuff sculpting. I'd never done anything like this before, beyond much simpler stuff like the baguette, for example. So I started off with the base shape of the body, so which is sort of like the body and the head, then letting each section cure before moving on to the next. So I then did the beak and then the little crests one at a time, slowly, so sort of rolling those separately out and then adding them onto the model, doing this little gullet, I think it's called, and then doing the feathers at the back. And sort of what I did with these guys is I sort of added on an extra section that I sculpted in, and then lastly adding on the wing. And then at the same time I was doing the back. So the back sort of lines up roughly with the front. It's not quite as smooth as it perhaps should be, but I think that will work out to my advantage, mostly because it's going to be painted up to look like metal. So I think the fact that it looks like a bit dinged and dented and sort of handcrafted will just add to the finished look. I'm really pleased with this model, and it was really fun to do the sculpting of the rooster. That's all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed understanding how I created the coaching staff. I hope you're inspired to do your own as well. I always think adding more to your team, doing all the tokens and the staff really helps bring your team to life. There will be more to this series. I've still got to cover the star players. Do check out that video, and if you haven't seen the previous ones, which is to do with the halflings and their treemen, please do check them out. Until the next video, take care.